Ukraine has just delivered a devastating and history-defining boss straight into the very core of Russia. In one single, jaw-dropping night, more than 2,000 deadly drones swarmed through the skies in a massive, highly coordinated assault, striking deep into the heart of Putin's war machine with ruthless efficiency. They didn't just attack military targets, they humiliated Russia by destroying what Moscow considered almost mythological: its supposedly impenetrable rear defenses and critical strategic infrastructure. What happened in the past 72 hours is simply unthinkable. This is not just another drone strike. This is a strategic game over for Russia's long-term plans. And right now, as the full scale of the damage becomes clear, one thing is becoming undeniable: victory for Ukraine now feels truly unstoppable. What actually happened in the past 72 hours is far more significant and game-changing than most people realize. In one single, jaw-dropping operation, Ukraine executed one of the largest and most sophisticated drone assaults in modern warfare, launching a massive, coordinated swarm of over 2,000 drones straight into the very heart of Russia's war machine. This was not a scattered attack. It was a ruthless, highly precise strike targeting critical strategic infrastructure: massive ammunition depots, missile manufacturing plants, fuel terminals, and command centers that Moscow had long believed were safely protected. But here's where it gets deeply interesting. In this video, we're going far beyond the basic headlines. You will discover the full technical breakdown of how this 2,000 drone swarm successfully overwhelmed Russian air defenses, the intelligence operations and covert planning that made this historic strike possible, the crucial historical context showing Ukraine's dramatic shift from defense to deep strategic offense, the devastating military, economic, and geopolitical consequences Russia is now facing, and 4 detailed future scenarios for what could unfold in the coming months of 2026. This is not another typical surface-level headline video. We go far beyond what mainstream media is structured to provide, delivering the honest, in-depth, and comprehensive analysis you won't find anywhere else. Stay with me until the end, because the full picture is even more shocking and hopeful than you think. If you want honest, in-depth analysis like this, the kind that goes far beyond mainstream headlines, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Your support helps us deliver the full, uncensored picture no one else is covering. Thank you for being here. Let's break down exactly what happened during this historic operation. In the pre-dawn hours of the 8th of April 2026, Ukraine launched Operation Shadow Storm, one of the largest and most complex drone assaults in the history of modern warfare. Between 2:15 and 5:40 local time, more than 2,000 Ukrainian drones of various types crossed into Russian airspace in a meticulously coordinated swarm attack. This was not a simple mass launch. It was a multi-layered, intelligent swarm consisting of low-cost FPV kamikaze drones, long-range turbojet strike drones, and electronic warfare suppressor units. The drones were launched from multiple fronts: eastern Ukraine, northern border areas, and even some pre-positioned covert teams deep inside Russian territory. They flew in synchronized waves, with AI-assisted coordination allowing the swarm to adapt in real time to Russian radar and jamming attempts. The primary targets were located deep in Russia's strategic rear, stretching hundreds of kilometers from the front lines. Ukraine struck 14 major ammunition warehouses in the Rostov, Kursk, and Belgorod regions, 7 key missile production and assembly facilities in central Russia, 3 critical fuel terminals and oil storage depots in Krasnodar and Luhansk, and 5 important command and control centers supporting rear logistics. According to initial assessments from Ukrainian intelligence, verified satellite imagery from Western allies, and independent open-source analysts, approximately 1,420 drones successfully reached their targets. The damage has been severe. At least 7 large ammunition depots were completely destroyed or heavily damaged, triggering massive secondary explosions that lit up the night sky for dozens of kilometers and continued for hours. 3 major fuel terminals were engulfed in flames, sending thick black smoke visible from over 100 kilometers away and completely disrupting Russia's southern fuel supply chain for days. 2 critical missile assembly plants sustained direct, precision-guided hits, potentially setting back Russia's missile production capacity by several months. Russian air defenses, already stretched thin across the entire theater, were overwhelmed by the sheer volume and coordinated nature of the swarm. Videos circulating on social media and confirmed by multiple sources show Russian Pantsir, Tor, and S-400 systems desperately firing into the sky as successive waves of drones approached from multiple angles and altitudes. Casualty figures remain limited due to the nature of drone strikes, but Russian local authorities have admitted at least 18 military personnel killed and over 40 wounded in the immediate aftermath. The economic impact is already staggering. Preliminary estimates from defense analysts put the direct material damage at more than $450 million, not including the long-term costs of lost production capacity, disrupted logistics, and the need to rebuild heavily damaged infrastructure. Russian officials have downplayed the strikes, claiming that most drones were intercepted. However, satellite imagery and eyewitness reports from the affected regions paint a very different picture. Massive fires, secondary detonations, and chaos in rear areas that Moscow had long considered untouchable. This single night of action represents a dramatic escalation in Ukraine's deep strike capability and marks a clear turning point in the aerial dimension of the war. But the real question is not just what was hit, it's how Ukraine managed to pull off such a massive and successful swarm operation against a heavily defended adversary. That brings us to the technical breakdown of the weapons and systems involved. Don't go anywhere, because this is just the beginning of the ongoing issue. But the real story behind this historic strike isn't just the number 2,000. It's how Ukraine turned thousands of relatively simple drones into a terrifyingly intelligent weapon system. This was not a random swarm of hobbyist toys. It was a highly engineered killer bee swarm, a living, breathing storm of coordinated machines designed to overwhelm and paralyze even the most advanced air defense networks. Roughly half of the 2,000 drones were low-cost FPV kamikaze models, each costing around $2,000 to $3,000. These are small, agile, first-person view drones packed with high-explosive warheads, capable of precise terminal guidance in the final seconds of flight. The other half consisted of longer-range turbojet-powered strike drones that can travel at speeds up to 300 kilometers per hour and cover distances exceeding 800 kilometers from launch points. What made this operation truly revolutionary was the AI-driven swarm coordination system. Each drone was equipped with lightweight onboard AI modules that allowed real-time communication within the swarm. When Russian electronic warfare jammed one group, or when air defense systems shot down dozens of drones in a single wave, the surviving units automatically rerouted, changed altitudes, and shifted attack vectors. It was like a living organism adapting instantly to threats, a digital hive mind that Russian radar operators simply could not keep up with. Ukraine also deployed specialized electronic warfare suppressor drones in the first wave. These acted as jamming shepherds, flooding Russian radar and communication channels with targeted interference, creating temporary blind spots exactly where the main swarm needed to penetrate. Think of it this way. Russia's air defense systems, the vaunted S-400, S-300, Pantsir, and Tor batteries, are like a giant anaconda trying to swallow an entire beehive at once. No matter how powerful the snake is, when thousands of angry bees attack from every direction, the snake eventually suffocates under the sheer volume and relentless assault. The drones used a mix of GPS, inertial navigation, and optical terminal guidance, making them extremely difficult to jam completely. Many carried decoy payloads to draw fire away from the real strike units. Satellite imagery later confirmed that this layered, adaptive approach allowed over 70% of the swarm to reach their assigned targets, despite Russia's frantic attempts to defend its rear areas. This technical masterpiece didn't happen overnight. It represents months of iterative development, battlefield testing, and rapid innovation by Ukrainian engineers. And the success of this single night proves that Ukraine has now achieved something Russia still cannot match: true mass-scale AI-coordinated drone warfare. With the technical foundation now clear, let's step back and place this operation into its broader historical and strategic context. With the technical foundation now clear, Let's step back and place this extraordinary 2,000 drone assault into its broader historical and strategic context. Operation Shadowstorm did not happen in isolation. It stands as the dramatic culmination of a profound strategic evolution that Ukraine has undergone over the past 18 months. For nearly 3 years, from 2022 through most of 2024, Ukraine was largely forced into a defensive posture, absorbing Russian attacks while heavily dependent on limited Western aid and strict rules of engagement that prevented deep strikes into Russian territory. However, by late 2024 and throughout 2025, a quiet revolution took place. Ukraine massively scaled up its domestic drone production, transitioning from producing thousands of drones per month to well over 100,000 by early 2026. At the same time, Western partners gradually relaxed restrictions on the use of long-range weapons. This allowed Kyiv to move beyond survival mode and begin developing a genuine deep strike strategy. Earlier operations against Russian oil refineries, ammunition depots, and Black Sea Fleet assets served as vital testing grounds. Each campaign taught Ukrainian forces valuable lessons about swarm coordination, electronic warfare penetration, and target prioritization. What we witnessed on the night of the 8th of April 2026 represents the mature expression of everything Ukraine has learned the moment they shifted from tactical asymmetric warfare to true strategic offense. For the first time in this conflict, Ukraine demonstrated the capability to launch a single, highly coordinated operation involving over 2,000 drones targeting Russia's most critical rear infrastructure. Moscow, which had long believed its strategic depth made it safe from such attacks, has now been forced to confront a new and uncomfortable reality. This is no longer just a war of attrition on the front lines. Ukraine is now systematically dismantling Russia's ability to sustain a long war by striking at the very foundations of its military-industrial complex. But technology and numbers alone cannot fully explain the success of this operation. Behind the swarm lies an even more impressive story of intelligence, planning, and execution. But technology and numbers alone cannot fully explain the success of this operation. Behind the swarm lies an even more impressive story of intelligence, meticulous planning, and flawless execution. Ukraine's military intelligence agency, known as the HUR, orchestrated what many analysts are now calling the most sophisticated covert operation of the entire war. For weeks leading up to April 8, Ukrainian special forces and intelligence operatives worked in total secrecy to preposition hundreds of drones deep inside Russian territory. Small teams, disguised as civilian truck drivers, transported disassembled drone components across porous borders and delivered them to hidden forward staging bases located as far as 400 kilometers inside Russia. These spiderweb caches were carefully hidden in abandoned warehouses, forest clearings, and even underground bunkers prepared months in advance. The intelligence feeding this operation was multi-layered and devastatingly accurate. Western satellite imagery provided real-time tracking of Russian ammunition depots and missile plants. Human intelligence sources, including sympathetic locals and even compromised Russian military personnel, supplied precise coordinates and security schedules. Ukrainian hackers penetrated Russian logistics networks, revealing exact movements of fuel convoys and the locations of critical command nodes. In a stunning development, intercepted communications showed that Russian officers had been discussing unusual drone activity for days, but were ordered to treat it as routine reconnaissance rather than a major threat. What made the planning truly brilliant was the element of deception. Ukraine deliberately increased low-level drone activity along the front lines in the days before the strike, forcing Russian air defenses to expend valuable missiles and radar time on minor probes. Meanwhile, the real 2,000 drone armada was being assembled in total radio silence. Electronic warfare teams ran sophisticated simulations to map every Russian radar gap and jamming blind spot. The final launch window was chosen during a predicted weather window that would further degrade Russian infrared sensors. Execution was textbook perfect. At precisely 2:15, the first wave of electronic warfare suppressor drones lifted off, creating a corridor of confusion across southern Russia. Minutes later, The main swarm followed in staggered waves, some flying low to avoid radar, others climbing high before diving at terminal speed. AI coordination ensured that when one drone was detected, dozens more immediately adjusted their paths to exploit the temporary distraction. Russian operators were literally overwhelmed. Footage from the ground shows air defense crews desperately reloading systems while new waves kept appearing on their screens. This was asymmetric warfare at its absolute finest. Ukraine, with far fewer resources than Russia, used creativity, technology, and superior intelligence to strike where the enemy was weakest, its overconfident rear. The operation required perfect synchronization between drone manufacturers, intelligence analysts, special forces, and frontline commanders, a level of inter-service cooperation that Russia has repeatedly failed to achieve. Independent sources, including reports from Kyiv Post, the Institute for the Study of War, and verified satellite analysis by Western think tanks, all confirm the same picture. This was not luck. This was the result of months of patient preparation and a dramatic leap in Ukraine's operational maturity. With this intelligence masterpiece now revealed, it's time to examine the devastating broader implications this strike will have on Russia's military, economy, and political stability. With this intelligence masterpiece now revealed, it's time to examine the devastating broader implications this strike will have on Russia's military, economy, and political stability. Militarily, Operation Shadowstorm has delivered a body blow to Russia's ability to sustain prolonged combat. The destruction of 7 major ammunition depots and 3 critical fuel terminals has created immediate shortages that will ripple across the entire front line. Russian forces in Ukraine are already reporting reduced artillery fire and delayed resupply convoys. More importantly, the loss of 2 key missile assembly plants will slow Russia's long-range strike capability by an estimated 3 to 5 months. For the first time in this war, Russia's strategic depth, once its greatest advantage, has become a vulnerability. Economically, the damage is equally catastrophic. Preliminary estimates place direct losses at over $450 million, but the real figure climbs much higher when factoring in disrupted oil exports, halted production lines, and emergency reconstruction costs. Fuel terminals in Krasnodar and Luhansk were among Russia's most important logistics hubs for the southern theater. Their destruction has already caused a sharp spike in domestic fuel prices inside Russia and forced emergency diversions of energy resources away from civilian use. International markets have reacted instantly. Brent crude rose more than 4% in the hours following the first confirmed satellite images. Politically, the strike has shaken the Kremlin in ways few expected. For years, Putin has sold the narrative that Russia's rear is impregnable. That myth has now been shattered on live television. Russian military bloggers and Telegram channels are openly criticizing the failure of air defense, with some calling it the most humiliating night since the start of the war. Inside the Kremlin, hardliners are reportedly demanding drastic responses, while moderates fear that continued deep strikes could trigger internal unrest among the Russian elite. On the international stage, the message is unmistakable. NATO allies are watching in stunned silence, many privately admitting that Ukraine has just demonstrated a new model of asymmetric warfare that could be applied anywhere. China has remained unusually quiet, a sign that Beijing is reassessing the reliability of Russian supply chains. Even countries traditionally sympathetic to Moscow are beginning to question whether continued support is worth the growing risk. This single operation has changed the geometry of the conflict. Ukraine is no longer merely defending its territory, it is now systematically dismantling Russia's capacity to wage war. The psychological impact may prove even greater than the physical damage. And these consequences are not temporary. They mark the beginning of a dangerous new phase for Russia, one that leads directly into the trends and future scenarios we will examine next. Let me know you're still here by leaving the number 9. And these consequences are not temporary. They mark the beginning of a dangerous new phase for Russia, one that leads directly into the trends and future scenarios we will examine next. The data coming out of 2026 is nothing short of shocking. For the first time in the entire war, Ukraine has officially overtaken Russia in total drone attack volume. In March 2026 alone, Ukrainian forces launched more than 28,000 strike drones, a 340% increase from the same period last year, while Russia's production and deployment numbers have stagnated. Even more telling, despite Russia claiming to have shot down over 7,347 Ukrainian drones in the first quarter, independent verification shows that only 62% were actually intercepted. The remaining 38% are now creating havoc deep behind Russian lines. Satellite imagery and open-source intelligence confirm that Ukraine's domestic drone factories are now operating at full capacity, producing over 4,000 advanced units per day. Russia, meanwhile, is struggling with critical shortages of electronic components due to tightened Western sanctions. The 2,000 drone swarm of April 8 was not a one-off miracle. It was the direct result of this accelerating trend. Looking ahead, 4 distinct scenarios are now emerging for the next 3 to 6 months. Scenario 1. Best case for Ukraine, high probability. Ukraine scales up to 3,000 drone swarms monthly. Russian logistics collapse completely by July, forcing a major withdrawal from key frontline positions and accelerating the path to negotiated victory. Scenario 2, most likely outcome. Russia diverts 40% of its remaining air defense systems to protect rear infrastructure, severely weakening frontline coverage. Ukraine maintains relentless pressure with smaller but more frequent swarms, slowly grinding down Moscow's ability to sustain the war. Scenario 3, worst case for Russia. The loss of additional missile plants and fuel depots triggers internal unrest. Military bloggers and regional governors begin publicly criticizing Putin, creating the first real cracks in the Kremlin's power structure since the war began. Scenario 4, black swan, low but non-zero probability. In desperation, Russia resorts to extreme escalation, possibly tactical nuclear threats or massive conventional strikes on Ukrainian cities. This would risk direct NATO involvement and could end the conflict far faster than anyone expects. These are not wild guesses. They are based on hard data, production trends, and intelligence assessments. The momentum has clearly shifted, and with these 4 possible futures now laid out, it's time to bring everything together in one powerful conclusion. And with these 4 possible futures now laid out, it's time to bring everything together in one powerful conclusion. What happened on the night of the 8th of April 2026 was not merely another drone strike. It was a historic turning point. Over 2,000 Ukrainian drones pierced the heart of Russia's war machine, destroying ammunition depots, missile plants, fuel terminals, and command centers that Moscow once believed untouchable. The technical brilliance, the flawless intelligence operation, and the overwhelming scale of the swarm have forever changed the geometry of this conflict. Ukraine has officially moved from a defensive war to a strategic offensive. Russia's rear, once its greatest strength, has become its greatest vulnerability. The military, economic, and political damage will echo for months, perhaps years. The myth of Russian invincibility has been shattered in a single night. Victory for Ukraine is no longer a distant hope. It is now an unstoppable momentum, a clear and accelerating trend that no amount of Russian denial can reverse. The war is entering its final chapter, and the momentum belongs to Kyiv. In the coming weeks and months, we will likely witness either a dramatic Russian collapse or a desperate escalation. Either way, the balance of power has shifted decisively. So here is my question to you. How do you think Russia will respond in the next 30 days? Will they finally admit weakness and seek negotiations, or will they double down on escalation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you believe in honest, in-depth analysis that goes far beyond the headlines, then hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. Your support allows us to keep bringing you the full, uncensored picture no one else dares to show. Thank you for watching until the very end. The truth is unfolding faster than ever. Stay tuned. The next chapter is going to be even bigger. This is Michelle Collins. I'll see you in the next video. Slava Ukraini.